The Star Wars franchise has 9 mainline films, multiple series, and decades of lore, yet some of its biggest questions have never been answered. Not by the movies, not by the shows, not by anyone. So today I'm breaking down every major unanswered mystery in Star Wars and everything we know about them, starting with a group of warriors that somehow vanished from an entire trilogy: missing Mandalorians. Mandalorians can fight Jedi to a standstill. Their armor resists lightsabers. Their culture is built entirely around war. So when the galactic civil war breaks out, and both the Rebellion and the Empire are desperate for every possible advantage, you'd think somebody would pick up the phone. Nobody does. Episodes 4 through 6 contain 0 Mandalorian presence. Not a single warrior, not a passing mention, not even a rumor. A culture with documented combat superiority over Force users just doesn't exist for 3 entire films and multiple galaxy-defining battles. Here's the thing. No canonical source has ever explained this. The popular theory that Mandalorians were wiped out in some off-screen conflict before the original trilogy, that's entirely fan-invented. Lucasfilm has never confirmed it, addressed the gap, or even acknowledged it exists. The silence is total. You've got 2 factions fighting for galactic control, and neither one attempts to recruit or even acknowledge the greatest warrior culture in the galaxy. But at least the Mandalorians were just ignored. The next question involves someone who was actively hidden from the most powerful Force user alive. Leia's missing training. Leia Organa has the exact same Force lineage as Luke Skywalker. Same father, same blood, same theoretical ceiling. And she wasn't just sitting around doing nothing with it either. Throughout the original trilogy, Leia demonstrated real, undeniable Force ability. She sensed Luke calling out to her across the void of space in Empire Strikes Back. She intuitively knew the truth about Vader being her father before anyone told her. That's not luck. That's raw, untrained power. So here's the thing. Yoda was alive. Yoda was training capable. And Yoda watched Luke nearly blow the entire mission multiple times because the kid couldn't control his emotions. Luke was impatient, reckless, and abandoned his training early to rush into a trap. Yoda saw all of this happening in real time, and his backup plan was nothing. He had a second Skywalker right there and made 0 effort to bring her in. The irony is brutal. Yoda chose the emotionally volatile twin. Fans love to justify this. Leia was grieving Alderaan. She had political responsibilities. She had too many attachments. But here's the kicker. Those are all things Yoda could have actually said on screen. He never did. Not once. The films give us literally 0 reasoning for his decision, and canon later confirmed that Leia did eventually train as a Jedi under Luke after the original trilogy. She built her own lightsaber. She had the discipline and the power all along, which makes Yoda's complete inaction during an active galactic war even harder to justify. He gambled the fate of the galaxy on one unstable farm boy when a proven leader with identical Force potential was standing right there. Vader's blind spot. Here's one that has haunted Star Wars fans for decades, and it all happens in the same movie. During the Death Star trench run, Vader locks onto Luke's X-Wing and immediately announces, "The Force is strong with this one," just like that. No hesitation, no second guessing. He felt Luke's presence through the hull of a starfighter during a high-speed dogfight. Cool, but here's the problem. Earlier in that exact same film, Vader personally interrogated Princess Leia. He was in the room with her. He used a mind probe on her, physical proximity, direct mental contact, and he detected absolutely nothing. Leia is a Skywalker. She shares the same bloodline, the same parents, the same theoretical Force potential as Luke. Vader's own daughter was sitting right in front of him, and his Force radar gave him 0 signal. The best explanation fans have pieced together is that untrained, dormant Force sensitivity is harder to detect than someone actively channeling the Force, which Luke was doing during the trench run. That makes some logical sense. But here's the thing. That explanation was never stated in any film. It comes entirely from supplementary materials written years later to patch a contradiction that George Lucas almost certainly never planned around. The most powerful Sith Lord in the galaxy had his hands on his own daughter and felt nothing. But a random pilot in a starfighter? Instantly detected. Still one of the funniest contradictions in the franchise, and nobody has a clean answer for it. Ahsoka's disappearance. This one isn't just a mystery, it's a genuine contradiction that Lucasfilm has yet to fully address. Ahsoka Tano survived Order 66, fought through the entire Imperial era, dueled Darth Vader himself, and by the end of Star Wars Rebels, she's confirmed alive around 4 ABY. That places her roughly 31 years before the sequel trilogy, and then she just vanishes from the timeline with 0 explanation. Here's where it gets complicated. In The Rise of Skywalker, Rey hears the voices of past Jedi during the final battle against Palpatine. Ahsoka's voice is among them, not as a living ally, among the fallen. Fans immediately took that as confirmation she died, except Dave Filoni himself clarified that hearing her voice does not mean she's dead. He was deliberately keeping her fate ambiguous, but that ambiguity is exactly the problem. The Ahsoka series dropped in 2023, and suddenly she's alive and stranded in a completely different galaxy called Paradia around 9 ABY. That still leaves a 26-year gap before the sequels. If she's alive exploring distant galaxies, what was her voice doing in that scene? Canon still hasn't explained it, and the bigger question is even more frustrating. Ahsoka has direct experience fighting Palpatine's machinations. She trained under Anakin. She knows how the Sith operate better than almost anyone alive. When a Palpatine successor threatens the entire galaxy again, she's just not there. Nobody mentions her, nobody contacts her, the story never even acknowledges her existence. That's not a gap in the lore. That's a hole in the writing. But speaking of characters whose fates got messy after the original trilogy, the Inquisitor problem. So Vader not sensing Leia is one thing. He's got a lot on his plate. Running an empire, hunting rebels, breathing through a machine, fine. But the Inquisitors? Their entire job is detecting Force-sensitive beings. That's it. That's the whole gig. They're trained Force-sensitive hunters specifically designed to find people like Leia and eliminate them. And they couldn't find the one standing right in front of them. In the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, set in 9 BBY, young Leia has extended direct contact with multiple Inquisitors. Reva, the third sister, is actively hunting Obi-Wan throughout the show and comes into close proximity with Leia repeatedly. Direct confrontation, repeated interactions, and nothing. Zero detection, not even a flicker of suspicion. Here's the thing. Leia isn't just any kid with a little Force potential. She carries the Skywalker bloodline, the highest concentration of Force potential in the galaxy. Her father had a midi-chlorian count that made the Jedi Council lose their minds. And these specialized Force hunters, whose professional existence depends on sensing exactly this kind of thing, are apparently completely blind to it. Now, there is a supplementary explanation floating around. Untrained, dormant Force users are supposedly harder to detect than active practitioners, and that does some of the heavy lifting here. But the Obi-Wan series itself never states this. It never addresses the contradiction at all. You're just left watching trained specialists fail at their one job and expected to fill in the blanks yourself. But at least the Inquisitors only missed one Force-sensitive kid. Wait until you hear about the Emperor who somehow missed two. The Snoke mystery. Imagine being powerful enough to command an entire military regime, bend the will of a Skywalker, and wield the Force with genuine mastery. Now imagine that none of it was real, that your entire existence was a test designed by someone else, and you were always meant to die. That's Snoke. When The Rise of Skywalker pulled back the curtain on Exegol, we saw something genuinely disturbing. Rows of tanks filled with failed Snoke bodies, floating in fluid like discarded prototypes. Snoke wasn't a mysterious dark side entity who clawed his way to power. He was grown in a lab, a Strandcast, a genetically engineered puppet created by Palpatine to do exactly one thing: manipulate Ben Solo and then get killed by him. Here's where it gets dark. Snoke's death in The Last Jedi wasn't a twist. It was the plan. Palpatine designed Snoke to be destroyed by Kylo Ren as a trial of worthiness. Every moment of manipulation, every cruel lesson, every display of power was scripted theater performed for an audience of one. Snoke's entire on-screen arc was a rehearsal for his own murder. But the films never answer the questions that actually matter. What genetic material was used to create him? How did a lab-grown clone develop independent Force abilities? And the darkest question of all, did Snoke know he was a puppet? The novels fill in fragments, suggesting he was a Strandcast built from Palpatine's own genetic template supplemented with other sources. Some fans still cling to the Plagueis theory, speculating Palpatine used his old master's DNA as the base. It's never been confirmed, but it would be poetically horrific. The films give us almost nothing. A being of real power, real cruelty, and real influence reduced to a disposable tool in a single line of exposition. But if Snoke's entire existence was a lie orchestrated from the shadows, that raises an even bigger question. How did the man pulling those strings survive being thrown down a reactor shaft 30 years earlier? Luke and Ben's night. The Last Jedi does something that almost no Star Wars film has ever attempted. It shows you the same event 3 times and refuses to tell you which version is real. Here's what we know for certain. One night, Luke Skywalker went to his nephew Ben Solo's hut while he slept. What happened next depends entirely on who's telling the story. Luke's version, he sensed overwhelming darkness in Ben, and for a single fleeting moment, pure instinct, he ignited his lightsaber. He immediately felt shame and stopped, but it was too late. Ben woke up and saw his uncle standing over him with a weapon. Ben's version, Luke came to murder him in his sleep. No hesitation, no conflict. just a Jedi Master with a green blade trying to kill a sleeping student. Ben defended himself, and everything burned. And then there's the invisible third version. Snoke had been manipulating Ben for years, whispering into his mind, warping his perception. So whatever Ben remembers might not even be what Ben experienced. It might be what Snoke wanted him to experience. Here's the thing. This ambiguity isn't an accident. Rian Johnson confirmed he deliberately modeled this after Obi-Wan's certain point of view explanation from Return of the Jedi. No version is designed to be the objective truth. The film treats that as a feature, not a flaw. But the consequence is massive. Kylo Ren's entire moral arc, his betrayal, his rage, his eventual redemption, all of it rests on an event the audience is never given a stable version of. If Luke truly considered murder, Ben's anger is justified. If Ben's memory was corrupted by Snoke, then his entire villain arc is built on a lie he doesn't know about. Some fans call this the most sophisticated character question in the franchise. Others call it the most frustrating unresolved betrayal in Star Wars history. And honestly, both positions are completely valid. The film asks you to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, and whether that's brilliant or infuriating says more about you than it does about the movie. But if you think conflicting memories are confusing, wait until we talk about a mystery that spans the entire Skywalker bloodline from the very beginning. World between worlds. Let me describe something to you. There is a confirmed canonical dimension in Star Wars that connects every single point in time and space. You can walk into it, reach into the past, pull someone out of their own death, and walk back out. And that's not a fan theory, that's not speculation. That actually happened on screen. In Star Wars Rebels, a teenage Padawan named Ezra Bridger discovered a gateway on the planet Lothal and stepped into what's called the World Between Worlds. Once inside, he literally reached through a portal and yanked Ahsoka Tano out of her duel with Darth Vader mid-fight, seconds before she would have died. He saved her life by pulling her through time. Then he walked back out. Here's where it gets complicated. Palpatine himself tried to gain access to this realm. The Emperor of the Galactic Empire, the most powerful Sith Lord in 1,000 years, believed that controlling this dimension would grant him mastery over existence itself. Not just the galaxy, existence. That's how significant this place is. Palpatine thought it was worth more than the Death Star, more than the clone army, more than everything he'd already built. And then it just disappeared from the franchise. Nobody in the sequel trilogy mentions it. Nobody tries to find it. Nobody uses it to prevent any of the catastrophic events that follow. A working, proven mechanism for altering galactic history was introduced, used exactly once by a character who then vanished into another dimension and essentially shelved. The entire sequel trilogy plays out with conflicts that this realm could theoretically have resolved, and zero characters even acknowledge its existence. That's arguably the single most underexplored concept in all of Star Wars canon. Not a mystery that needs solving, but an answer that raises bigger questions than any mystery ever could. But if a time-bending dimension feels too abstract to worry about, wait until we get to a conspiracy theory so unhinged that the fan base has spent years building an actual case for it. Knights of Ren. The Knights of Ren might be the single biggest gap between concept and execution in all of Star Wars. A centuries-old dark side cult operating in the unknown regions, completely outside the Jedi-Sith binary, wielding their own unique weapons and following their own Force philosophy. That sounds like the most important piece of lore in the entire sequel trilogy, and the films treated them like background extras. Here's what we actually know. The Knights of Ren existed for generations before the First Order was even a concept. They weren't Sith. They weren't fallen Jedi. They were something else entirely, a parallel Force tradition that survived undetected through the entire Republic era, the rise and fall of the Empire and the early New Republic. Nobody found them. Nobody even knew they were out there. A hidden dark side cult operating for centuries in secret, and the Jedi Order with all their wisdom and foresight never noticed. Ben Solo became their leader after destroying Luke's temple, earning the title by surviving a brutal trial and killing the previous leader. He took the name Kylo Ren. 6 named knights followed him: Vikrul, Trudgen, Kuruk, Aplek, Cardo, and Ushar. Each had specialized weapons. Each had individual combat roles. Each had exactly 0 meaningful screen time in the films. Their origin, their philosophy, their connection to Snoke or Palpatine, their strategic role within the First Order, all of it lives exclusively in visual dictionaries and reference books. The movies gave them cool masks and moody lighting. That's it. And the punchline? In The Rise of Skywalker, a newly redeemed Ben Solo defeats all 6 of them in roughly 30 seconds. Rey passes him the Skywalker lightsaber through their Force dyad, and he cuts through centuries of dark side tradition faster than a cantina bar fight. But if wasted potential frustrates you, wait until you hear about the one place in Star Wars that could literally rewrite everything: Palpatine's blind spot. Palpatine is supposed to be the ultimate mastermind, the guy who manipulated the entire Galactic Senate, orchestrated a galaxy-wide war on both sides simultaneously, and destroyed a 1,000-year-old Jedi Order from the inside. This is a man who plans decades ahead, and yet somehow he had zero idea that his own apprentice had children. Let that sink in for a second. Luke Skywalker grew up on Tatooine, Vader's home planet, raised by the Lars family, Vader's step-family, under the surname Skywalker, Vader's actual last name. Nobody changed it. Nobody moved him off-world. Nobody gave him a fake identity. The kid was living under his father's name, on his father's planet, with his father's relatives. That's not hiding. That's barely even trying. And then there's Leia. She was adopted by Senator Bail Organa, one of the most prominent political figures in the galaxy, raised on Alderaan in full public view, a princess, attending Imperial Senate sessions. If Palpatine had spent 5 minutes investigating Bail Organa's sudden acquisition of a daughter around the exact same time Padme died, the entire rebellion collapses before it starts. But here's the thing. The moment Luke gets anywhere near the Death Star, Palpatine senses him through the Force instantly. He feels Luke's presence like a beacon, so his Force sensitivity clearly works. He can detect powerful Force users without breaking a sweat. But for 19 years, two of the most Force-sensitive beings in galactic history were growing up in plain sight, and he felt nothing. Some fans theorize that the Force itself shielded the twins, actively concealing them from detection. It's a cool idea, but no official source has ever confirmed it. No film, no novel, no comic has given a canonical explanation for why the galaxy's supreme spymaster and most powerful Sith Lord couldn't do what a basic background check would have accomplished. It's the single biggest logical gap in the franchise. And honestly, it only gets more absurd the more you think about it. But speaking of things that break under scrutiny, let's talk about a mystery that literally bends reality itself. Palpatine's survival. Let's talk about the single most controversial moment in the entire sequel trilogy. Palpatine was thrown down a reactor shaft by Darth Vader. The Death Star 2 exploded. The galaxy celebrated. The Emperor was dead. Case closed, right? 30 years later, he's back. And the movie's explanation for how? A single line from Poe Dameron. Somehow Palpatine returned. That's it. That's what audiences got. Here's the thing. There is an actual explanation. It's just not in the movie. Canon establishes that Palpatine used an ancient Sith ritual called essence transfer to shoot his consciousness into a cloned body on Exegol, a hidden Sith world so secret that his own empire didn't know it existed. His original body died, his mind survived, and for approximately 30 years, he existed inside a decaying, deteriorating clone hooked up to mechanical life support in an underground lab, pulling strings across the entire galaxy. Let that sink in. The main villain of the sequel trilogy was a rotting corpse in a basement for 3 decades. But it gets wilder. The clone body was failing, so Palpatine created multiple clone iterations searching for a vessel strong enough to contain his full power. None of them worked. His own son, a non-Force sensitive clone, escaped Exegol and had a daughter, Rey, born 15 ABY, 11 years after Palpatine's death. She was the intended host body the entire time. His granddaughter wasn't an accident. She was the endgame of a bloodline engineering project he was running from inside a collapsing body on a planet nobody could find. And here's where it gets frustrating. None of this is in the films. Not really. The mechanism, the timeline, the scope of his post-death scheming, all of it lives in the Rise of Skywalker novelization, visual dictionaries, and companion comics. The movie that built its entire plot around Palpatine's return never bothered to explain Palpatine's return. Audiences weren't confused because they weren't paying attention. They were confused because the information literally wasn't on screen. This isn't just an unanswered question. It's the unanswered question that the entire final chapter of the Skywalker saga was structurally built around. And the fact that you needed a reading list to understand it is exactly why, somehow, Palpatine Returned became the most memed line in modern Star Wars. But speaking of things that break the rules of the Star Wars universe, there's one mysterious realm that might be the most powerful and least understood concept in the entire franchise: Anakin's conception. This is the one that breaks everything. Not a side mystery, not a fun Easter egg. This is the question that, if answered definitively, rewrites the entire Star Wars saga from the ground up. Here's what we know. Shmi Skywalker told Qui-Gon Jinn plainly in The Phantom Menace that there was no father. She carried Anakin, gave birth to Anakin, and raised Anakin, but nobody fathered him. The pregnancy just happened. The Force, she believed, was responsible. And when the Jedi tested young Anakin's midi-chlorian count, it came back at over 20,000, higher than any Jedi in recorded history, higher than Yoda, higher than anyone thought was possible. For years, that was the extent of it. A miraculous birth, a chosen child, and a prophecy about balance. Simple enough. But then Darth Vader issue 25 changed everything. The comic reveals a vision showing Palpatine using the dark side of the Force to directly manipulate midi-chlorians and cause Shmi's pregnancy. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, the panel shows Palpatine's shadow looming over Shmi as the Force conception takes place. The implication is staggering. The man who would become Emperor, the galaxy's greatest tyrant, personally engineered the birth of Anakin Skywalker years before he ever met the boy on Naboo. Let that sink in. Palpatine potentially created the Chosen One, the weapon that would eventually destroy him. And here's where it gets complicated. If Palpatine created Anakin, then what does the prophecy even mean? Was Anakin truly chosen by the Force to bring balance, or was he a Sith experiment that accidentally fulfilled a prophecy he was never meant to be part of? Was his fall to the dark side inevitable because his creator was the dark side? Was his redemption in Return of the Jedi a triumph of free will, or just another variable Palpatine failed to account for? The full mechanism of how you use the Force to create biological life has never been explained in any film or major canon work. The comic confirms it happened, but tells us nothing about the how or the why. Whether Palpatine intended Anakin as a weapon, a vessel, a test, or something else entirely remains completely unresolved. And that's what makes this the biggest unanswered question in Star Wars. Every other mystery on this list exists within the story. This one exists underneath it. If Anakin was always Palpatine's creation, then the entire prequel trilogy, the original trilogy, and the concept of destiny itself in this universe become fundamentally more complicated. The Chosen One might have never been chosen at all. He might have been designed. Was Anakin Skywalker ever truly free, or was he always Palpatine's design, from his very first breath to his very last? Star Wars has never answered that, and honestly, maybe it shouldn't. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.